So, get this. How can a country lose a war but actually come out stronger, both strategically and financially? In this explainer, we're diving into the really surprising, almost paradoxical fallout of a hypothetical US-Iran conflict, all based on an analysis by Fareed Zakaria. The whole story, seriously, boils down to this one number: 2x. Since this hypothetical war started, Iran's daily oil revenue has literally doubled. And you're probably asking, how on earth is that even possible? Well, we're going to break down exactly how a military defeat somehow turned into this massive economic win. Okay, so to really get how this all went so sideways, we have to rewind the clock a little. Before the conflict, the thinking was pretty straightforward. Iran looked like a wounded animal, which, seemed like the perfect time to make a move. And look, this wasn't just talk. By early 2025, Iran was in really, really bad shape. Israeli air campaigns had hammered their military infrastructure and taken out key leaders. Their biggest ally, Hezbollah, totally crippled. On top of all that, their economy was just an absolute wreck from sanctions and corruption. Militarily, economically, they were on the ropes. So, here's where it gets interesting. You had the official story, and then you had the real story. Publicly, the line from President Trump was, "Oh, we're just there to help our allies." But what reports suggest is that the real plan, supposedly sold to him by Prime Minister Netanyahu, was way bigger. The idea was to hit Iran while it was weak and hope that people would rise up and finish the job. Regime change. And so the campaign kicked off. And let me tell you, if you're just looking at it from a military point of view, it was a spectacular success. The strikes were precise. They were devastating. A textbook operation. The stage was set back in 2024 with those Israeli strikes. Then Iran's key ally in Syria, the Assad regime, completely collapsed, a huge blow. And then in June 2025 came the main event, a massive 12-day bombing blitz from US and Israeli forces. And the results? Wow. They were decisive. The nuclear facilities were, to use Trump's words, totally obliterated. The missile program was set back for years. Access to nuclear materials? Denied. Militarily speaking, it was a home run. Check, check, and check. Yeah, this quote from Israel's top military commander pretty much says it all. It looked like a total, unqualified victory. They really believed they had neutralized the threat for a long, long time. But this is the exact moment where the whole story just flips on its head. And this gets us to the absolute core of this story. It's a huge lesson. Winning on the battlefield doesn't always mean you've actually won. In fact, sometimes a perfect military operation can create a problem that's 100 times worse. So remember that number one assumption, the one where the Iranian people were supposed to rise up against the government? Well, it turned out to be completely wrong. The exact opposite happened. The regime didn't collapse, it dug in. The old Ayatollah was killed in the strikes, yeah, but he was replaced by his even more hardline son. The Revolutionary Guard, the most extreme faction, got even more powerful. The attack didn't break the regime, it radicalized it. And this new, angrier leadership, well, they had an ace up their sleeve. To get it, you have to understand the Strait of Hormuz. Think of it as a giant bottleneck for the world's oil. A massive chunk of all global oil exports has to squeeze through this one tiny waterway. If you control it, you basically have a stranglehold on the world's energy supply. And guess what they did? They played that card. It was a bold, game-changing move. They didn't just close the strait completely. No, they did something much smarter. They blocked it to all oil tankers, except their own. For nearly 50 years, this was the big threat that was always talked about but never actually happened. Well, now it was real. And with that one move, the entire script just gets flipped upside down. This is how Iran's military devastation was transformed into an unbelievable economic windfall. It's the central paradox of this whole thing. It's simple supply and demand, right? You choke off global supply, and what happens? Oil prices shoot through the roof. And since Iran was the only one in the neighborhood who could still get its oil out, their revenue doubled. Let me say that again. They were making twice as much money after getting bombed than they were before. So how are they pulling this off? Well, a couple of ways. First, their own oil is now selling like crazy, especially to buyers like China. Second, and this is the real kicker, they're reportedly charging other ships a transit fee, a toll basically, of $2 million just to pass through.
That adds up to hundreds of millions in new cash every single month. Plenty of money to rebuild their military and then some.
Now, a crisis this big doesn't just stay in one region. The blockade sent massive shockwaves through the entire global economy, and it created a really clear set of winners and losers. On the winners team, Russia, obviously, just raking in billions from high oil prices. China also comes out looking pretty good, positioning itself as the stable superpower while America is bogged down in another mess. But the losers were America's own allies. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia saw their economies get crippled. Europe was slammed with crushing energy costs. And Ukraine, it lost out on critical military aid as weapons got diverted to deal with this new conflict. A total disaster for U.S. allies. Which brings us back to the U.S. president. He now finds himself in a totally impossible position, completely boxed in with no easy way out. And you can almost feel his frustration boiling over. I'm just going to read this next part directly from the source material because it really captures the moment perfectly. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump wrote, and this is a direct quote, explicit language and all, "Open the fucking street, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch." I mean, wow. Analysts describe the post as unhinged, a clear sign of just how frustrated he was. And here's why he's so frustrated. His options are just terrible. Option A, escalate. Hit them again. But Iran has already shown it will respond, probably by hitting energy infrastructure, which just pushes oil prices even higher. Okay, so what about option B? De-escalate. Try to declare victory and go home. Well, that basically means leaving Iran in permanent control of the strait. It is a strategic dead end, a classic no-win situation. So the bottom line is this. Despite the overwhelming, undeniable military success of the bombing campaign, the consensus among the analysts cited is that Iran, the country that was supposedly defeated, is now the one holding all the cards. They have the strategic upper hand. And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question. This whole scenario forces us to ask, can a nation win every single battle, achieve every single military objective, and still end up in a way worse position than when it started? Can a war be both a tactical masterpiece and a complete strategic catastrophe?